I was thinking of a funny incident that I remember happening, but memory is fallible, so don't quote me on it. And it was in preschool, or just beyond preschool, and we were at a show and tell class session, and people brought up an array of interesting things. Someone brought in a rubber horse, someone brought in a toy truck, but then a child stood up, and I don't know the child, I can't remember who it was, but the child pulled out a photo album and opened it up at the first page and held it up in front of the class, and there was a collective scream from all the children. Half of it was screams of laughter and half of it was screams of horror. So I edged forward through the classroom to get a better look at the photo album, and what it was a photo album, more like a sketchbook style that children do when they collect interesting pictures of things like animals or things they like. And this was slightly different. The child had a photo collection of venereal diseases in various stages of development. And he introduced the first picture, and it was a man who was standing naked in a medical room, and there was a doctor with a magnifying glass kneeling next to him, looking closely at his nether region. And the closer you looked at this photo, the more disgusting it became, because the central focus was the man's crotch, and on his private part there was a huge boil, and under the photo there was a caption that labelled the disease. I can't remember what it was, but it was a scientific name. But he said, my dad had a look at it, and he said, that's a boil that's bigger than Mount Everest. And then the child said, and my dad told me, you really don't want one of those growing on the side of your... Anyway, the list went on, page after page, and I felt I was looking at a medical dictionary of horrible diseases which humans can contract. And that's exactly what we were looking at. And the teacher asked the child eventually, after the child had explained chlamydia and syphilis to the class, exactly how the child had developed this interest in venereal diseases and other horrible afflictions. And the child replied, well, it all started with my mother. And the teacher pricked up her ears and said, how so? And to answer the teacher, the child said, my mother told me I wasn't born in a manger. And the teacher said, what did she mean by that? And the child said, I don't know really what she meant. I don't know what a manger is. But she went on to tell me that I was born in a public toilet. And the teacher then got the child to sit down, and the next child stood up and presented on the next topic, which was the latest comic release from some bygone superhero that was still fighting off the villains of the world. And I found out after that class that the child who presented the venereal disease photo album got a top mark. actually the child got 10 out of 10. And the teacher said that was the most educational show and tell we've ever had. And the child who presented the photo album was very happy, obviously, and said to the teacher, "Thanks for the great mark and the comment. I'm glad you really liked my presentation." And the teacher said, "Yeah, it had a personal meaning for me." And we all looked at the teacher at that point and said, "What personal meaning?" And the teacher blushed at that point, and we're not sure exactly what she would have said, and she never answered. And at every show and tell that followed for about the next 6 to 7 weeks, there was a range of photo albums of truly disgusting, horrendous human conditions. And it became a research project for the class students for quite a while to see who could find the most disgusting pictorial or photographic representation of human illness and deformity. And I finished that year with a rather extensive understanding and knowledge of not only venereal diseases, but pretty much every affliction that humans have ever experienced. And I found out later the teacher who took that year class was transferred to another school or quit. And then later after that I found out that she had once contracted a venereal disease of her own and had to abstain from sex for a couple of months while the doctors treated her. And I suspect that's what she was going to tell us in the classroom that day. But for whatever reason she didn't. Maybe she was too embarrassed, or the memory was too fresh in her mind.